Picture this. It's February 18th, 1944. There's a blinding, howling blizzard ripping across the English Channel, and a squadron of Royal Air Force pilots is about to attempt something that sounds completely, utterly impossible. We're talking about flying wooden bombers straight into a snowstorm at literal treetop height over occupied France. Now, imagine you're the military commander handed this absolute nightmare of a scenario. Your mission? Rescue over 100 French resistance fighters locked deep inside a heavily fortified, stone-walled Gestapo prison. Oh, and the catch? If the breakout fails, you have a horrifying backup plan: to kill all of your own allies.
So, what's their unbelievable solution to this problem? Well, it was to literally bomb the prison walls down from the sky while the prisoners were still locked inside their cells. I mean, you've got to be thinking, wait, they actually did what? Yeah, they planned an airstrike to blow open the doors of a prison using high explosives. Welcome to our explainer on Operation Jericho. Part 1. Who was Pickard, the eccentric pilot who rode dairy cows to war?
Before we get into the absolute chaos of the raid itself, we really have to ask, who on earth volunteers to lead a mission this crazy? Well, meet Group Captain Percy Pickard, better known to his friends as Pick. He was this 6'3", pipe-smoking absolute force of nature. In the early days of the war, he built a reputation as a pilot with a frankly terrifying lack of fear. Ground crews were totally used to seeing him bring back aircraft that were just completely shredded by anti-aircraft fire, and he'd step out totally unfazed.
His background is it's beautifully bizarre. Listen to this guy's resume. He finished at the absolute bottom of his school class. On Sundays, he genuinely enjoyed riding dairy cows in a field for fun. Seriously, cows. Before the war, he drove a broken-down car from Kenya all the way to Egypt while actively delirious with malaria. He took his sheepdog Ming absolutely everywhere. And my personal favorite, at one point, he tried to train a Czech pilot who claimed to have 2,000 hours of flight experience, only to realize the guy was actually a navigator who had totally lied about knowing how to fly. Pickard's reaction? He just trained him to fly anyway. He was brilliantly, wonderfully unorthodox. Which brings us to our next chapter. The Gestapo's Amiens deadline, a race against the executioner. Okay, so here is the context. It's just months ahead of the massive D-Day invasion of Normandy, and the Allies are facing a dire problem. The Gestapo is ruthlessly rounding up key French resistance leaders across northern France and throwing them inside Amiens Prison. Crucial intelligence networks are just collapsing left and right, and worse, the local Gestapo commander decides the prison is getting a bit too crowded, so he sets an execution date for over 100 of these resistance members, February 19th. Somehow, smuggled blueprints of the prison made their way back to London, along with a desperate plea: get us out of here. Next up, Operation Jericho, the plan. 3 waves, 1 horrifying backup. To pull off this rescue before the executioners lined up the prisoners, Commander Basil Embry comes up with Operation Jericho. It was a plan so meticulously precise that the Air Force actually brought in peacetime cake decorator experts to build highly detailed scale models of the prison for the pilots to study. The attack would be split into 3 waves. Wave 1 was supposed to crack the outer shell of the prison walls. Wave 2 was tasked with breaching the inner cells right at lunchtime, aiming a bomb directly through the canteen roof to crush the German guards while they were eating. But Wave 3 is where this plan gets incredibly dark.
The third wave of bombers had explicit, chilling orders. They were to completely flatten the prison and kill everyone inside if the first 2 waves failed to break the prisoners out. The justification was grim, but, strategically necessary for the larger war effort. The Allies simply could not risk the Gestapo torturing these prisoners and extracting the top-secret plans for the upcoming D-Day invasion. The brutal military logic of the time was simple: dead men don't talk. Because of the immense, horrific weight of that backup plan, Pickard put himself right in command of the second wave. He needed to be the one on the scene, looking down at the rubble, so he could personally make that agonizing decision on whether or not to call in that lethal third wave. In the morning briefing, he looked at his crews and told them this was a death or glory mission.
Let's look at skidding bombs and dogfights. 12:01 p.m. at wave top height.
So it's February 18th, 1944. They take off in their de Havilland Mosquitoes. Now, these are incredibly fast bombers made almost entirely of wood, and they're flying directly into a blinding snowstorm over the English Channel. Here is the craziest part. They had to release their 500-pound bombs from an altitude of just 50 feet. 50 feet!
that is so low they were essentially playing a game of chicken with the prison courtyard walls. I mean, at that speed and height, if you pull up even a fraction of a second too late, you're a fireball in the snow. The attack itself was just utter chaos. See, the planners hadn't fully considered what happens when you drop heavy bombs into deep snow at 50 feet. The 500-pound bombs literally started skipping and skidding hundreds of yards across the snow like stones on a pond, finally slamming into the unmortared prison walls. The blasts were so immense, so powerful, that they blew the heavy steel doors right off the prison cells. Now, while the guardhouse was successfully flattened exactly at lunchtime, which neutralized the German guards just as planned, the blast had a terrifying side effect. It hit a hidden stash of German hand grenades, creating this massive secondary explosion. And this is all happening just as totally confused, terrified, and exhilarated prisoners are flooding out of the breached walls and sprinting into the freezing snow. Which leads us to the tragic, triumphant aftermath. The ultimate price for freedom. High above all this chaos, Pickard was circling, acting as Arse and Charlie, basically the rear observer checking the results of the strike. He's looking down through the thick smoke, and he finally sees them. Tiny figures of prisoners escaping into the snowy fields. Mercifully, he immediately jumps on the radio and signals the third wave to abort their grim backup mission and head home. But the story doesn't end there. Pickard lingered behind to check the rubble one last time to make sure there were survivors making it out. And because of that, his lone Mosquito was suddenly jumped by 2 German Focke-Wulf 190 fighters. These were highly lethal interceptors, and Pickard was all alone. The dogfight that followed was brief but intense. Pickard and his navigator, Broadley, dodged multiple attacks with incredible skill at unbelievably low altitudes. But eventually, a German fighter landed a fatal shot, blowing the tail clean off Pickard's Mosquito, a plane affectionately known as F. Freddy. The aircraft rolled over, crashed in flames, and killed both Pickard and Broadley instantly. When you look at the numbers from this raid, they are staggering and profoundly bittersweet. Out of the 832 total prisoners in Amiens, 102 were tragically killed, either by the Allied bombs themselves or shot by German guards in the utter chaos of the breakout. However, 258 prisoners managed to escape the Gestapo's clutches entirely. And this mission genuinely changed the course of the war. Those escaped resistance fighters, they didn't just go into hiding. They went straight back to work. They successfully exposed 60 Gestapo agents and informers in the region, completely crippling German counterintelligence right when the Allies desperately needed to keep the secrets of the D-Day landing safe. Oh, and as a little bonus, the ordinary criminal prisoners who escaped alongside them were quietly amnestied by the local French police. Operation Jericho leaves us with this incredible provocative thought. Just think about the sheer unbelievable audacity of the planners who drew this up on a chalkboard, and those pilots like Pickard who risked and ultimately lost absolutely everything to blast open a prison from the sky. When the price of freedom means dropping high explosives on the very people you are trying to save, is it worth the terrifying cost? It is a brutal question. But on a freezing day in February 1944, the Royal Air Force answered it at 50 feet.